Hello and welcome to the 14th Scouching Report for the 2021 NHL Draft, and ladies and gentlemen, we have made it. We've reached the Scott Morrow report, and I know for people who have been followers for a long time, it may have been a very long wait, and now that he's in the USHL with one game at that level that I tracked, I think the time has come. So I will note off the top that I am objectively a huge believer in Scott Morrow. I know there's some doubters out there, mostly revolving around the level of play that he's playing at. And I will admit that he's not a perfect hockey player, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But this is a player that I really believe in, and you'll see why. Honestly, if there is a defender outside the top end range of this year's draft that, even if it's limited, has the potential to be one of the great NHL defensemen, I think it may be Scott Morrow, at least in the offensive side of the game. But Scott Morrow did play the entire season at the prep hockey level playing for Shattuck St. and he absolutely, positively, 100% was punching below his weight class. He had no business playing at that level of hockey. Family reasons, both with and without the COVID-19 pandemic, is what kept him at Shattuck for another year, and honestly, I can't really fault him for that. The NHL is not just something that is coming and there's a deadline. If it means that he takes an extra year to get there, or if it means it extends his runway a little bit more, I don't really seem to mind. I think this is a long-term thing, and this is a little bit weird for everyone in some way. But him playing at prep school this year led to results that were bonkers. They're just bonkers. It's crazy. Let's just roll the tape. And for this quick breakdown of his data, I'm going to include the 7th game I tracked, which was a USHL game, because even including it, which wasn't necessarily as otherworldly, his overall data set still is unbelievable. His dangerous shot attempt percentage with him on the ice was 78%. He was on the ice for 34.8 dangerous shot attempts for, and just under 10 against. He took over 110 pass attempts per 60 minutes and completed over 77% of them. He had 13 dangerous pass attempts per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which is not only number 1 for defenders by quite a wide margin, but number 20 in all players I've tracked this year. He took or assisted on 30.7 shot attempts when he was on the ice per 60 minutes, which is also number 1 amongst defenders, but also number 17 in my total data set. And his offensive controlled zone transition percentage was 82%. And in the USHL game I tracked, it was just over 58%, which was also his first game in the USHL. So with that USHL game dragging that number down, it's still ridiculous. And on the defensive side of the puck, he shut down almost 80% of defensive transitions coming his way. So okay, enough about the actual data, and you can set it aside because he was playing in a level where he really didn't belong. So what is it about him that drives results that are that unbelievable? So we're dealing with a 6'2", right-hand shot, offensive leaning defenseman with absolutely massive skill level with his hands and ridiculous offensive aggressiveness. His offensive threat generation through both passing and shooting is unparalleled, and he did it through driving it with his own feet and hands. He was in a class of his own in prep school hockey this year, and players have been drafted out of prep school hockey before and found success, so it's not like this hasn't happened before. But it really looked like at times Scott Morrow would just put the puck on his stick and do whatever he wanted. His ability to generate speed and drive offensive transitions with his feet, deceiving neutral zone defenders with his hands, and pulling pucks around the ice to navigate rushing lanes and passing lanes, it's remarkable. It's really fun. He has a big body and he pushes it deep into the ice to drive turns and drive speed generation, and he uses that shifting of his body weight to evade opponents, create new rushing lanes for himself, navigate himself into open ice, and escape pressure extremely well at this level. And the real magic is just how deceptive he is with his hands and how well he can use his skill to move the puck into new open ice, navigate into it, and keep attacking the opponent. And this translates into his ability to drive offense from the blue line, as he can fake out opponents constantly and just step up from the blue line, take a couple of steps, and drive either a dangerous pass from the middle of the ice or take a dangerous shot attempt himself. And people can question his decision of playing for Shattuck this year when he really didn't belong there, but to me, I still look at how he plays on the ice in these games, and he isn't just dominant in this level, it's just not the same class. And good players come from prep all the time. And he is a tall, lanky defender that does things on the ice that you just you don't see many players do a whole lot. He can absolutely dance and fly around the ice with strong technique and creativity and skill and keep opponents guessing constantly. And it doesn't matter what level of play you're playing at. If you can do that consistently and do it well and get results, you can at least try to translate to next levels, and hopefully it works out, and it probably should. And Scott Morrow would concern me a lot more if he didn't have this skill and he blended into the background of his talent group and the opponents that he was playing against. And he was getting lucky bounces here or there, or he was passing pucks to younger, faster, more talented line mates who were doing a lot of the hard work for him. But that's not what was happening. He was doing a lot of these things himself and looked pretty good doing it. And even when dialing things back a bit and he takes his feet out of the equation and he's surveying the ice looking for passing opportunities, he has exceptional patience and he has exceptional passing vision, and he can spot breakout options that just keep things simple and pushing play in the right direction. This isn't a guy that's just getting the puck and going end to end all the time. I mean, he does do that too. He can do that from time to time, but he also is passing pucks across blue lines and utilizing line mates to his advantage. And a really good example of what makes Morrow projectable at this level to me is being identified here. Morrow leads the opponent into thinking that he's a shooting threat, only to quickly send a pass to an open line mate. Stuff like this indicates to me that Scott Morrow isn't just a good prep school hockey player, but a crafty, skilled, and projectable offensive defenseman. And there was an interview that I caught with my good friend Tony Ferrari over at Dauber Prospects where he interviewed Scott Morrow. And Morrow mentioned in that interview that when he gets the puck, his mentality pretty much immediately switches into attack mode, and I can absolutely believe that, and it's very blatant on the ice. He's incredibly active with the puck on his stick, with excellent skill and the ability to play selflessly, participate as a unit, but also put the team on his back and try to drive dangerous offense himself. At this level, he just goes and goes and goes and just dominates offensive possessions and turns play around quickly when he doesn't have the puck to continue offensive possessions. And I don't think that he should have any trouble taking that attack-minded mentality to the NCAA with him and learning how to make it work at that level. He recently decommitted from North Dakota, where there might be a bit of a logjam on defense when he does show up, and goes to UMass Amherst, where they do have a bit of a lack of really high-octane players now, with departures like Mark Del Gaizo and Zach Jones to the Nashville Predators and New York Rangers respectively. Scott Morrow can fill those shoes in my opinion, and guys like Cale Makar have come out of that school, and Zach Jones is already kind of making waves with the Rangers. So now we can flip gears a little bit and talk about the defensive side of the game, because this is where things with Scott Morrow get a little bit more complicated. So the data itself has been really promising, but people are rightfully identifying that Scott Morrow's defensive pure ability is kinda hit or miss. Morrow got himself involved in just 21.6% of defensive transitions, and again, this is at the prep school level. To me, that is relatively low. That indicates to me that at a very, very low level of hockey, a mobile, skilled offensive defenseman is being very passive on defensive rushes. And maybe part of that is the opponent trying to tactically avoid him. And that does make sense to me though. Scott Morrow did seem quite passive, more than willing to let play come to him deep in the defensive zone and be a little bit passive on those encounters when they happened. And he would do two things I really don't like seeing, which is not really closing gaps at all, and not applying much defensive pressure in those situations at all to try to turn those pucks over. But he certainly had the mobility and skills to get involved, it's just that he didn't do it often. So to me, that's a bit troubling. And this was something that I picked up a little more and more as time went on, and eventually it just became hard to ignore. I was willing to put things aside early on, but as the season wore on, more and more instances of this really passive defending came to light, and it just really became a bit of a knock on his overall projectability. And at the level we're talking about, you can't be a player that is as comfortable with the puck as Scott Morrow is, but having as much trouble as I'm indicating in this clip at the prep school hockey level. But I will say that in this area of the game, he's also not terrible. It's not worth throwing him out as a case study as a whole, especially as a first round pick. In the USHL, I felt that this has improved game over game when I've seen him, and if his stick checking did create a loose puck, he was basically off to the races again, and you kind of forget all the negative things that you might have seen from time to time from him. He's rangy, he has the talent to be better defensively, he jumps on loose pucks aggressively, especially in the neutral zone, and he brings that attack mindset in a flash. He goes from standing straight up on his heels, waiting for the puck to come to him in a way that you might not want to see a whole lot of, but then once there's a loose puck, yeah, it's basically game over. And a lesser concern for me with Morrow is that there are sometimes lapses in judgments and just the ability to track opponents around the ice. And it leads to Morrow having issues at times where you really don't want your defenseman to have issues. He can invite pressure too often to himself, and while at the prep school level he has no problem escaping that pressure, this was an issue that kind of reminded me a little bit of Kent Johnson. He drew in a lot of attention, and he didn't always have the ability to escape it, but he always was trying to escape it on his own feet. He could do better to use line mates a little bit more effectively and drive play a little bit better from time to time without relying strictly on himself, and I think that would help project his NHL projectability. And this is an issue that I think has followed him to the USHL in multiple games that I've seen him play at this level. He does seem to not really know the limitations of his game at the USHL level, and it does indicate to me that while he's incredibly promising, you might need to be a little bit patient with him to coach him along for the next couple of seasons before he turns pro. And I feel like his head is often pointed in the right direction, and even though his execution is a little bit sloppy, I'd rather someone capable of these high-end, high-octane offensive skill plays playing on defense, and have them refine it and pull it back a little bit and have a little bit more dynamic ability in their game than the opposite, where they're very well refined defensively, but just don't offer much in the way of offense, and you're trying to push them to be more aggressive and offensive. The overall point is that there is a lot of things that Scott Morrow can do very well, and in my sample, he did them a lot. Such a diverse skill set of daring and aggressive offensive traits with the size and range of a player like Scott Morrow. It just doesn't come around very often, so you can absolutely count me as a believer in Scott Morrow. So what's the best part of Scott Morrow's game? And honestly, the biggest thing is the combination of size and skill, especially for a defenseman. To me, if I may be so bold, it's kinda unparalleled amongst the defense group this year. It might be a bit of rose-colored glasses from him playing prep, and I am certainly willing to be wrong, but I look at the defensemen in this year's crop and see Brandt Clarke as a very skilled offensive-leaning defenseman, but beyond that, Scott Morrow might have the highest offensive upside out of the rest of them potentially. But in terms of combining size and skill and aggressiveness offensively and creativity offensively, he's pretty close to the top of the board for me. He deceives opponents by making them think he's going to rush along the boards in the offensive zone, only to stop, pull pucks inside in a flash, and drive into a more aggressive area looking for more dangerous play. And his ability to work the offensive zone in a projectable way, looking to get new looks at line mates, open up new rushing and passing lanes, to me it just feels universally projectable. Yes, he's playing at a very, very low level, but the things that he is doing aren't just being a good player at that level. To me, he's playing really, really good hockey. The good part is Scott Morrow's passing vision. Whether it's in the offensive zone or not, I really felt that overall his ability to spot line mates, wait for the right time to strike, and execute on those passing decisions, it was great. Yes, he can make plays in the offensive zone, and yes, he was driving dangerous passes at a tremendous rate for Shattuck, but that was kind of to be expected for a player with his profile, even if it still was quite overwhelming. But defensemen do need to play in the defensive end and the neutral zone, and offensive defensemen need to be able to rely on line mates and hit them with passes so that they can continue breakouts, and Scott Morrow can definitely do that. The not so good part is, as much as I can live with rangy, skilled, mobile offensive defensemen who aren't necessarily the strongest physical players, what I can't live with is a big, rangy, skilled offensive defenseman who has clear focus issues and lapses of judgment with how he plays as a big, rangy, skilled offensive defenseman. To me, one of two things kinda need to happen. When he's facing breakout pressure, he needs to recognize that breakout pressure quickly and just get the puck to a line mate. Or he's going to need to build up another speed to escape pressure, escape opponents, and create space for himself to drive offensive breakouts that way too. He was getting closed out too often deep in the defensive zone, not making passing decisions quick enough under light pressure, causing a few too many turnovers in situations where, against better competition, yeah, it could have gone pretty poorly. And this is an area of the game that absolutely will get exposed in the NCAA if it's not improved. At the USHL level, I felt that his game has steadily improved game over game, but in the game that I tracked, which was his first USHL game this season, he did show some issues in this area as well. And a lot of it comes down to mental lapses in judgment that I think feed from maybe some bad habits from playing at this level of playing when he is such a talented player. Frankly, I absolutely loved watching Scott Morrow play hockey this year. I really can't sum it up any better than that. Yes, he was playing prep school hockey. Yes, sometimes he was playing 18U AAA hockey teams in the middle of the United States. And yes, I know that can frame things in a certain way that might not be as projectable to the NHL. But Morrow, in that level of hockey, was putting up just about as close to perfect hockey performances as you'll ever see. It's not like this was a 50-50 dangerous shot attempt percentage player. It's not like he was a 60-40 or even a 70-30. This was a player with 4 of his 7 tracked games at 85% dangerous shot attempt percentage or higher. So how does a player that good at that level project to the NHL? I don't know. But I do know that good prep school players have gone drafted much later than the first round and turned out to be pretty good. And yes, the opposite can be said with players like Jay O'Brien in recent past, but I still very strongly believe that Scott Morrow shows more than enough projectable skills and talents that put him as something more than just a good player for prep school hockey. I fully expect that his numbers will regress. There are 0 NHL players that even come close to the kinds of shooting differentials we're talking about here. That's just to be expected. And yes, he does have focus and awareness issues away from the puck, and his defensive intent will need to come a bit of a ways in the next little while. But in my opinion, holy crap does this guy ever have talent. Skill is skill. Vision is vision. Offensive generation is offensive generation. There are players out there that have put up some pretty good numbers in my data, and I don't really believe that it's projectable. But I don't really have those kinds of concerns with Scott Morrow's natural talent profile as it is today. And I don't think he's a player that can't overcome whatever barriers might come his way in the next little while, because there definitely will be barriers. But as long as he focuses on trying things, not being afraid of making mistakes, not losing that attack mentality that makes him so special right now, and most importantly of all, actually learning from those mistakes when they happen to mitigate them moving forward, I think he could turn out to be a heck of a hockey player, and I've already seen his game mature and grow in the USHL, so to me that bodes kind of well. And at the end of the day, in the draft, we're not looking at who is the best, most projectable NHL player today. It's what kind of NHL player could they be? And with Scott Morrow, I don't know what he could be, but I honestly don't really feel like there's a limit based on how he plays right now. He sits at 21 on my list. If he had played a full USHL on a very talented Fargo Force team, he very well could be higher than 21st on my list, and I feel like he would probably be higher on other lists as well. But the names that he would be leapfrogging at this point have played at least at the USHL for the vast majority of this season. Many of them have played in professional leagues overseas and played well in those leagues, and Morrow's lapses of judgment and defensive passiveness are legitimately concerning at times to me. But it also seems like this player may be an early second round pick, and I'm not sure there's a defenseman that I would push harder on day 2 than Scott Morrow as a long-term bet. Let him develop at UMass for at least another season or 2, and then you see what you get. Yeah, you could have a really special hockey player there. But assuming his natural development increases his speed, makes him more agile on his feet, and his in-game experience cuts down on the potential mistakes and the misreads he can make defensively, and continuously just gets better and better without losing that attack mentality, I think there's a chance we could be looking at a premier NHL defenseman. And even if his potential for true greatness might be unlikely, in my opinion, it's hard to ignore. And I think that if there's an NHL team out there that can snag him in the second round, as well as adding an elite level player at the top end of this year's draft, it certainly would push your rebuild in the right direction very, very quickly. So that's all for this Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or join our YouTube membership program by clicking join below. You'll get early access to videos, exclusive written reports, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects across the NHL, as well as plenty of other goodies you can check out. Or you can pick up some merchandise at the Scouchwear shop where 50% of profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and we'll see you in the next one.